Much for starting. Yeah, we're right on time. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bible study today. We're picking up with the torn curtain in the temple that happened just about at the moment of Christ's death on the cross. And I'll just give you a little hint of what's coming up that I've been writing. Having so much fun writing for our group. We meet at Seaside Springs once a month. We're having some very interesting discussions. We're going to talk about Paul and the Herodians, all the kings named Herod, and the high priests and the members of the Sanhedrin who followed the disciples in terms of either helping, and 3 emperors, helping or hurting the spread of early Christianity. Because it really was quite extraordinary. Every time I read the statistics, it was actually spread faster than internet use spread in modern. Absolutely. Yay! We were just talking about you about the tickets.
Not bad.
Yes, it was.
All good. All good. Tickets for the Odyssey.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned at 9 o'clock, I was told.
Yes.
And has anyone tried to get them online?
We're gonna go and, Karen's gonna help us after this.
Oh, okay,
Perfect.
great.
Scott and I have tickets.
Because
You
you're
can sit in our
overachievers.
room.
No, Karen did it for me.
I was just gonna say, that's how I got my ticket. Karen did it. So, all right, and you didn't miss a thing. We're just about to discuss the curtain in the temple. Now, apparently, the temple structure was such that the presence of God was reserved for one room in this huge temple, and that room was known as the Holy of Holies. And that's where God was. That's where the special altar, the menorah, all of that. And there was a curtain, some people say, at the entrance. And when Christ died, that curtain, after it got dark, remember, it just got immediately pitch black dark. At that moment, the curtain tore. And I always picture the curtain like this, high structure. And I suppose it tore like that, but I'm not really sure, or like that, who knows. But the question is, do you think that God tore the curtain open? Because now everyone is welcome into the temple. Everyone can come in now. A lot of Christians actually were taught that, to believe that before that, only certain Jews could go into the temple. It wasn't open to everybody, and that just was never true. There were temple of the Gentiles, courtyard of the Gentiles, courtyard of the women. People were always welcome to worship God at the temple. There were rules concerning who could go into the Holy of Holies, because it was special. And that's true in any house of worship in all different cultures. But do you think that why did Mark even put that in his gospel? Do you think it was to show that God wanted everyone to know that no one would be left out of the temple? That now the temple is open to everyone. But does Mark ever tell us that certain people weren't allowed in the temple? And after the curtain is torn, did he ever mention people going into the temple? No, he just kind of drops the subject. And Mark never mentioned anyone refused entry to the temple. So I'm not really sure. Remember, we're talking about that oral tradition. Mark wasn't there when Jesus was crucified, but he heard stories about it. People who had been there, many people think that main person was Peter, that Mark had a relationship with Peter. But of course, we know Peter wasn't watching. Peter was hiding, denying he even knew. But the story was that this is what happened. So interesting question. Why did that curtain tear? But it's really more important, why did Mark even tell us about it? And then just leave it, no explanation. But I think even more interesting has to do with that Roman soldier, the centurion. Do you remember the moment Jesus died? What do you think impressed that Roman officer into believing that Jesus really is the Son of God? Because he's a pagan, right? He believes in many gods. He's not a Jew. He wasn't a Jesus follower. What came to him? What kind of a vision or a feeling that he just uttered, this man, Jesus, is the Son of God? Do you think it was something that Jesus said from the cross that nobody else heard? We just don't know, because Mark doesn't ever tell us. But what about you? Do you think you could look at Jesus up on that cross and just see that he's the Son of God just by looking at him? Or would you know Jesus if you heard him speak?
I would think that this dying man and what he endured and what he said, which was a variety of things he said,
Yeah.
that the centurion would have been really struck. Unusual.
Incredibly struck to make that statement,
Yeah.
which has lasted hundreds of years, over 2,000 years. And it wasn't anyone else who said it. It wasn't a converted priest, it wasn't
He's a witness.
he saw it. He saw it.
Or felt it. I think it's just.
You wonder, did he feel guilt? Did he doesn't talk about that.
He hardly has time in the moment to feel guilt, just awe.
Now, have you ever had the opportunity to talk to someone who did not believe in Jesus and says, I would like to know, why do you believe in Jesus? Like, what proof do you have? What feelings do you have? Because when you start the Jesus story, when he's just kind of a thought in God's head, right? It's a really tough story to tell. Well, what do you mean, a virgin? What do you mean, Holy Spirit? I don't understand that. Could you? Well, no, I actually can't explain why or what, why would your God do that? Why would he make it impossible for people to believe in him? And I never think of it that way because we've been blessed with hearing the story from the very beginning. But this centurion,
Can you imagine
no.
him and what he saw and what he heard and how Jesus spoke to the people watching?
And the other thing is, think of how many crucifixions that centurion had witnessed. One after the other after the other. They say that Via Appia, that road, was just lined with crucifixes, one after the other. And we talked a little bit about the fact Jesus died rather quickly, comparatively speaking. Yes, rather quickly, because of course Jesus was flogged, which helped the early death. But other people who weren't flogged, who were just nailed up there, they could last 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days. And we also talked about the fact that we picture the crucifixes, or at least the body on the cross, positioned well above ground level. But that wasn't the case from cadavers who'd been discovered by archaeologists, we know now that very often feet were almost dangling on the ground because these bodies have their toes gnawed off by scavengers. Yeah, and I don't know, I always thought squirrels, but I guess there are no squirrels in Jerusalem, but some kind of animal that could crawl up and eat the soft tissue, you know, the nose and
God.
lips and all on the corpse.
Rats.
Rats, yeah.
Oh, rat.
Yeah,
That's what I
rats,
thought.
I would think then rats. Can smell the blood.
So that's what was typical, you know, and don't you almost, when you picture Christ on the cross, it's almost a kind of sanitized, yes, he's bloody, but he's glorious, right? I don't think about chewed feet or nose.
You know, it can come across, I guess, immediately.
It's funny. It's just a funny way to try to explain. And we've made the point over and over again, and we'll see it when we start Matthew's gospel also. The cross was a sign of shame. You know, people didn't talk about it. It was absolutely awful. You know, well, my father, yeah, he lost his life in the electric chair for being a child rapist or something. You know, that it was that kind of shame. Even the Romans didn't talk about it. But these are the kinds of things we'll talk about as we go, particularly next week, when we look at those conspiracy theories that are connected to the crucifixion. Now, next week, and we'll start it today, I think, we'll finish Mark's Gospel. We're going to talk about those women who went to the tomb when the Sabbath was over. We talked about them last week. What did they hear from Jesus? And I think, you know, when they saw him, when they must have had some kind of connection. They were so close. And the most important question, I think, and the one I think is, why did the women who went to the tomb, why did they keep any information to themselves? They didn't share it with anybody, and we'll see that shortly. Those ladies got information that was given to them at the tomb, but they didn't share it with anybody. And why didn't they? There's so many questions that Mark leaves unanswered.
I thought they went and told the
not in
Well,
Mark's gospel.
okay.
Cause listen to this. Okay, yes, question.
I'm just curious reading this, who's the man that was clothed in the long white robe sitting on the right side?
Yeah, we didn't, that,
Did you know- I'm
we
just
think,
reading.
we think he was an angel,
Okay,
an
okay.
angel.
Just one sentence or two there and then that's it.
Yeah, do you
Okay,
wanna,
and they went
yeah,
to-
cause you weren't here last week,
Yeah,
we kinda
yeah.
went through this,
Oh, okay,
but,
okay.
a young man clothed in white, like dazzling white, we think that was to remind us of the transfiguration, because Christ is about to be transfigured again with the resurrection in 40 days. Well, first 3 days he's going to rise again, but then he's going to ascend 40 days later, go back to sit at the right hand of God. And, but what that figure in white tells the women is,
He's not here.
yeah, he's not here, but you go meet him in Galilee. He's going to Galilee. And we talked about how many times Mark tells us that Jesus told them all, yeah, I'm gonna be crucified, I'm gonna die, but then I'm gonna be raised again, and meet me in Galilee after I'm raised
I
again.
wonder what their thought is though, who is this person in there? Who is
Oh,
this
they were shocked.
individual?
They were absolutely shocked.
I would be very shocked.
Yeah.
Now sitting in that tomb where
How
it's
do
not
you get in
Jesus,
there,
who's
first of all?
doing it?
Yeah, how did,
Get
and
in there?
And
Yeah,
how did he
yeah,
get
you
in
totally
there?
question, like, who are you? I'm not leaving until I.
well, actually,
find out.
Mary says that in another gospel. She says, "Who are you and what have you done with my Lord? You know, where have you put him? Where have you taken him?"
It's in
This is-
him.
Yeah. But, all right, here we are, chapter 16. Mark ends his gospel this way. So we're 16, number 1.
Yep.
And when the Sabbath day was over, Mary Magdalene, or Mary of Magdala, and another Mary, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome. Mark mentions all three, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome. They brought spices with them so that they could go to the tomb and anoint him. And this is such a brief chapter. It's only 9 verses. So Mark only gives us the facts. So let's look at the facts very carefully. First of all, the first thing he gives us is Sabbath. Sabbath is specifically mentioned, and I think for an important reason. Because on Shabbat, the typical Jewish burial rituals couldn't be performed. You weren't allowed to do them on the holy day.
Because you couldn't work at all.
No. And that's still true in many instances today. Burial rites and things can't be performed on the Sabbath. Now, a quick question. Have any of you ever been to a Jewish burial or a Jewish viewing, so to speak?
Viewing.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Oh, well, it was my boss's mother, and her casket was in a separate room and it was closed, as I recall. And he was sitting in there with her. And then,
And she hadn't been buried.
no, at that point, oh, no, that's right.
Yeah, because I know sitting Shiva, which is post-burial.
Yeah, 7
Oh,
days.
this must be
Yeah.
before,
Yeah, that's what I thought you were gonna say,
so
but
long ago.
but you're positive she was there. I wonder if she must have been a
Yes,
reformed,
he
yeah.
was, as you said, he was sitting, I don't know if it was total separate room or a little enclave off the main room. where
Yeah,
the
I'm
casket was.
certainly no expert, and if you're interested, I can bring, more specific information, next week. But there are fairly typical, rites and, performances that must take place. For one of the most important things is that once the soul has left the body, once the person has died, that body is never left alone. And we learned that, yes, we learned that in divinity school when we were all studying to be chaplains. We had passes as chaplains, div school kids, I wasn't a kid, but to get into the morgue, where the first year interns didn't. They had to enter the morgue with the doctor. But we had to go so that we could bring family members who could stay in the morgue with, or, unless there was a room available, because the body is never left alone. And it has to be buried very quickly.
Yeah, on the same day?
Yes, one day, 24 hours, and but that kind of changes a little bit here and there. The reason is that, as I understand it, when the soul is released, it hovers with the body until the body is interred, and then it's released to go. So the person who sits, family members, always, the body is never left alone. Somebody will always be with it. And if you're a single widow or whatever, there are services, there are societies that will perform these rituals for you if you can't do it for yourself, because they're absolutely crucial. And part of that, which is post-burial, is the Shiva. When you cover the mirrors, you can't wear makeup or jewelry or anything, you know, you have those days. Now,
I've
Irish,
been to one of those too, it was in, and I can't remember who it was in the house,
yes,
and
mirrors are covered,
I could, I guess it was, I don't remember that.
you
but
bring
the
sweets,
person was sitting on
stool,
yeah, nothing comfortable, that's for sure, yeah.
no.
Is that, do you think it goes way back in time to protect the body from animals?
Very well could be,
This was another Jewish person.
yes,
Obviously.
yes, yeah, that could be, but I think it's even more spiritual than that, but you know, so much of the spirit comes from the reality, you know, to keep that body. And the other thing is, the body has to be buried in Jerusalem soil. Well, of course, we don't have Jerusalem soil here, but you can buy it.
You're
And,
kidding.
yeah, you can buy a bag and people toss it. And if you've ever been to a graveside burial, Jewish, you are invited to add dirt on top of. And when I asked at Tour Tuesday, everyone said, and they're all Christian, they put flowers into the grave. I don't remember doing that. You know, walking by an open grave and the priest or somebody would give you a flower and you drop the flower. But when was the last time you went to a graveside ceremony? We just don't, most people are cremated now, right?
Nowadays, yeah.
Yeah, I went to one when I was up in New Hampshire.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And it was Christian?
but I used to be a grave digger. when I was
Really?
young.
Oh, really?
And the Jewish would bury them differently.
Say more about that.
So normally we would set a ball, concrete ball, and have a lid that's sealed.
Wait, set up a concrete,
There's this concrete ball you put in on a normal Christian burial.
oh, and then you put the,
The casket goes in, the lid goes on, and it has a ceiling.
yes, you can't do that,
No,
now
so
it has to
with
be
the
pine,
Jewish,
yes,
no, we
Oh.
put down 4 pieces of wood,
yes,
and then the rabbi would come and put a little soil in it, which you talked about.
yes,
And then, after the service, the casket would be set down, and the vault was set upside down on top.
oh my
And I think it
goodness,
was explained to me that the body has to go back to the soil where it came from.
that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Perfect sense. That's interesting. I didn't know about that. I did know that Jews do not buy expensive, fancy coffins. The body, everybody's body has to be in a plain pine coffin. And everybody has to be dressed in a plain linen shroud. You know, nothing fancy. I guess back in the day, people put mom's pearls on or dad's rings or something, but not in a Jewish ceremony. You kind of go the way you came,
No,
you
the
know.
cemetery room is.
Oh, ashes to ashes, dust to
Yeah,
dust. That
I go
makes
back to the
perfect
soil.
sense. Oh,
and the rabbi would come, or a member of the temple would come and inspect before the service was done
Oh,
correctly.
Make
That we
sure
had dug it correctly.
it's kosher.
but no Muslims were buried there that you remember.
Never know that I did it, no, I don't think so. This is New Hampshire.
And you could bury, you didn't have to hand dig it, right? You could use machines.
We did both.
What do you mean by a vault?
It's
Like-
a concrete ball.
Like a box almost.
Yes.
Empty
So
box.
So you put a box, a
Yes,
the
a
concrete
concrete
box
box
in
would
there?
go in first
I didn't
on
know.
a normal Christian burial. Casket goes in it, and then the lid goes on top.
Do you think that's for methane, to keep the methane from getting
It
into
just-
the soil?
Took dirt and put the box in the dirt.
I don't know when that, prior to 1920, they didn't use a ball.
No, because you could bury in your backyard then. But the methane gas exposure was so bad, it was environmentally unsound, that,
Could be also, you had
and what
probably,
about embalming too?
well, that started about 1850, 60, just prior to the Civil War. But also, the ones that had just a casket that was buried, over time would collapse and drop down in because everything is
Right, right,
decomposed. So that may be part of the reasons they went to a concrete vault,
yeah,
because you'd be remowing in the cemetery, also, the tractor wheels would drop down.
Now, when I was up there, the graveyard was across the street from the end of my street or our street, it's right there. My father's buried like with his father and another family, like right there, so it's close by. So we always used to drive by, stop by, check it out.
right,
When he was buried about 7 years ago in there, and I remember the closed casket was there, ready to be lowered down in. They dug it out with machines, you know, diggers and stuff, and it was closed, and all of us were standing around, and the priest, you know, had his sayings and stuff, and there was a bunch of flowers around, and just all you had to do was go take one and put it on top of the casket, and, you know, just say a little prayer or something to it. That's why they did that. And we just walked away, and it just down it went.
but I
After that,
think
don't
it
know if they
went
put it on
down
top or
into
didn't.
I always called it a crypt, but you called it a
Vault.
vault,
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting, I
Probably.
never thought of that.
Traditional, I guess.
I just thought they dug dirt and dropped the thing in the dirt.
No, it's a concrete vault.
So it doesn't crush.
So it
So it
takes
doesn't
up that
collapse like you
specific
said.
amount of,
Yes.
so many inches of this and that, yeah.
Mm.
And that stays, that doesn't deteriorate.
No,
Interesting.
sealed. Yeah, and,
So the box inside can.
this guy, if it was a big man, they'd tell us it was an oversized vault, we knew the dimensions.
Interesting. What an interesting job you had.
What you've seen.
Well, let's go back to this burial, which of course wasn't in the dirt, it was in a cave, and that's where the women are going, right? They're going with spices like myrrh and, nard, all kinds of, and they're going and they're kind of in a hurry because, as we said, Mark specifically mentions Shabbat, because those rituals that have to be performed on a dead body can't be performed on Shabbat. The women had to wait until Sabbath was over before they could buy spices for anointing or even doing any anointing, because so many activities are limited on the Sabbath. But, and we'll see that again. Look at verse 2. Now, Mark names the women who were walking to the tomb. And let's look at who these women are. The first woman that Mark names is
Mary Magdalene.
Mary Magdalene. And with that Mary is another Mary, the mother of James. And she's always been known as the other Mary. Mary Magdalene's the famous one, and this one is the other Mary. But probably that's not the first Mary that you think would be there, right?
Think maybe the mother.
The mother. Where's Jesus's mother? Neither one of those are the Blessed Mother. This second Mary is the mother of James, but not James with his father Zebedee. This is James the Lesser. He's the other disciple named James. But some say that this second Mary is actually the wife of Clopas. Clopas. Do you remember them marrying Clopas? They're in John's Gospel, and Luke's too, I think. And some say that Mary, the second Mary, the other Mary, the Mary, mother of James, she is the Virgin Mary's sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, because Clopas is the Blessed Mother's legal husband's brother. So Joseph had a brother.
Joseph's brother, yeah.
Right, and his name was Clopas. And we said we don't hear a word about Joseph after Jesus is about 12 years old. He's never mentioned in any of the Gospels. He kind of disappears.
She could have died, they didn't live all that long back in those days,
No,
right?
he
40s,
didn't.
50s.
I always picture the two of them as teenagers when they get, they're engaged and they get the word when Joseph has the dream and the angels come to see him. Trust me, she'll still be a virgin, and he's going. But he trusts God.
Wasn't, for some reason I pictured him as being much older, if she was 14,
I
he
know.
was 30 maybe.
Isn't that interesting? A lot of people do. I'm not
I don't know
sure.
why.
She could have been anywhere. I was just reading this for what I'm writing for you all. How, when we talk about child brides back in the day, they really were children. I mean, 11 and 12. I mean, it's just so terribly abusive. And they were married to older women. But it's funny with the families here, Joseph and Mary seem to have come from pretty good Jewish families, observant families. So you kind of think the families would have protected Mary, not too young. But she was probably 14, 13.
I mean,
Yeah.
by that time you're a mature woman,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what else are you going to do?
Well, yeah, no,
Well, yeah,
really,
I mean-
why would they marry so young? Seriously.
Because they died, first of all. Your chances of surviving childbirth 50-50.
That's what I'm saying, so why, usually something follows something else or whatever, but why would they have thought to marry such young girls off? If they knew,
And it wasn't just the Jews, the Romans too.
no, I know.
Yeah, very young.
Was it
very-
so because, girls weren't as
Valuable.
valuable?
That.
That's gotta be, that's the reason. So if the
A-
family could get
absolutely.
rid of the daughter, they don't have to provide for her.
But not in the Jewish
I don't
Christian
know.
custom. In pagan, yes. Romans, yes. Greeks, yes. And we talked a little bit about that in terms of exposure. Babies who were born that no one wanted, and they weren't aborted before the birth. And it was the husband's prerogative. I don't want that baby. They just took it to the dump and exposed the baby. And it was legal, completely legal. Infanticide. And it actually helped the spread of Christianity because Christians learned from the Jews every life matters. And they would go to the dump and get the babies, and they were mostly female babies. Yeah, males were worth more. But, so Mary, the wife of Clopas, sister-in-law, and if you think that's confusing, just wait, there's more from that. The third woman who's mentioned, what's her name?
Salome,
So do you know who Salome is?
no.
No, not the other one.
Yeah,
She
not
was-
the hoochie coochie one, right? Well, some people say that this Salome was probably Zebedee's wife.
Oh,
Yeah, you remember Zebedee, he had two sons,
Yeah.
John and James, and they had a very successful fishing business when Jesus calls the two boys who dumped their father, and went off with Jesus. So maybe this Salome is the mother of the sons of thunder, John and James. But in John's gospel, he also mentions Salome, but John identifies her as the Virgin Mary's sister, which would make her Jesus's Aunt Salome. Interesting. But that's the three women. We really, except for Mary, we don't really know much about the other two. But the important thing is they're on their way to the tomb, and Mark makes it very clear that they got a very early start. He even says, verse 2, very early, on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. So what's the first day of the week? Sunday.
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 Both of them, yes.
And we all know why they're going to the tomb, right? They tell us about 1,000,000 times. They're going to perform a burial custom on a dead body.
A dead, beaten up
Yeah.
body. Oh,
I mean, I can't even imagine the physical damage to his, to his face with the crown of thorns and the jabbing with either the reed or the staff, that they, and of course his back and his hands and his side. And when he was stabbed in the side, Mark doesn't mention this, but when that water and comes out, that was to see proof of death, to see if he really is dead. But think about the women were going there to deal with a dead body.
Right.
A body that they didn't expect was going to take a trip anytime soon. They didn't think that body was going to rise, or they probably wouldn't have done that. But not everyone agrees with that. But what do you think those 3 women are thinking? Are they thinking, let's get Jesus gussied up because he's going to be resurrected? Or are they thinking, let's prepare his body for death?
I think the latter.
Yeah, me too. Me
Because they were
too.
thinking, who's gonna roll away the stone?
Yes, exactly.
And these 2 mothers, Mary the Lesser and Salome, are more in the second generation, not the young ones.
Right,
And
right.
they're following their sons' entrance
Exactly.
here.
Yes, because that was very, very insightful. That was the case. And you'll see that when we talk about the spread of Christianity. Families traveled together to follow Christ. And after Christ was crucified and they joined the Jesus movement, they followed the disciples, different disciples in different areas of the world, in groups, spreading the word, the gospel, the good news. But in any case, no matter what we think they were doing, there they were. They were at the tomb, and they were going to treat the body according to ancient Jewish customs, one of which was to anoint the body with spices.
Anoint means what?
Well, it's interesting, that was my next point.
Oh.
It's called anointing, but when we think of anointing, what do you think about? Oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think of oil, and it kind of has the same result. Why did they put oil on a body? It smells, it has a fragrance to overcome a malodor or a bad fragrance. And it's also a way to show honor to a corpse. And it's also a way to, for odor control.
But these
Decomposing.
women loved him.
Oh, they loved him, they
So,
honored him.
you can see them, no matter what he looked like, they
Absolutely.
wanted to do this.
Absolutely.
And, even in our culture, it's those middle-aged gals that are the movers.
Absolutely. Very, very interesting. They become totally, totally dedicated, and they were from the very start with Jesus. Now, has anyone ever smelled a human body decomposing? You must know. No, they were kind of cleaned up by the time.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got it.
They're sealed in the casket.
Yeah. Yeah,
Have you?
In the morgue, I picture.
yeah, and when Lucy, when I was so afraid I was gonna have to rehome her because she was nuts, her trainer said, let's get her into a class, and she got into a search and rescue class, and she was very good at it. We worked our way up to decomposing. It was a special skill, and we got a little bitty vial, didn't give it to us, but to the trainer, who would put a little drop, and she let us smell it. It's beyond bad. I mean, it's just beyond bad. And I don't care what they say with morgues, how much they say, you know, it's cleaned, and it's just unmistakable, absolutely unmistakable.
Many years ago, we were traveling in Spain,
Yeah.
and we went down to the catacombs where the kings, you know, the
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it had quite an aroma going down there, and that's 500 years
Years
ago.
ago,
So they couldn't get rid of that odor.
was absorbed into the rocks,
Wow.
exactly. And, you know, that whole feeling that the body, it should never be alone, you know, you shouldn't leave the body alone, that doesn't seem to be the case here, but it is in modern Judaism. The body is never left alone. And any pieces, if there's an accident or an explosion or anything, absolutely every piece of the body has to be retrieved. And there are special units, you can call them, and they will come and scrape it up off the street if there's a car wreck, and, you know, pick up any pieces, any blood, any skin, and wrap it with the body so that they can all be buried together. So they set off, we saw that, very early with their spices. They're on their way, and the whole time, Mark makes this pretty clear, they're saying to one another, who's gonna roll that stone away from us? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna get in there? That entrance to the tomb is sealed with that gigantic storm, because we know the body is in the tomb, because Joseph put the body in there himself, Joseph of Arimathea. That was his own burial place. And then the very wealthy Joseph had arranged for a huge stone that had been carved out for the opening. And there was like, I'm saying like slits, like grooves in the ground below, and grooves on the entrance, that the stone could kind of roll in those little grooves and stay there, because no one could pick it up. It was just way too heavy. And of course it was sealed so that nobody could go in there and take anything that might have been left with the body. And scavengers, animals, couldn't get in there. But Mark,
But it was a tomb that had been used before, is that what
no,
we're?
brand spanking new.
He had that done?
Yes,
Okay.
it was brand spanking new. He had it built for himself. Joseph was not a young man, but very wealthy, very well respected. So it was in a really good place, very close to where Jesus was crucified. And Mark never mentions it, and we'll talk about it next week when we talk about the other crucifixion accounts. Mark never mentions guards posted, but apparently there were Roman soldiers posted. And apparently, if you saw The Chosen, there were Jews looking to make sure, you know, that nobody went in there and stole the body of Jesus, you know, from a distance. Jews didn't have any power, you know, but they kept watch on the tomb. But as the women were walking, Mark tells us in verse 4, when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. Now, Mark doesn't tell us what the three women are thinking. He just says, and then they went into the cave. And we can just imagine what they were saying. Who the heck rolled that stone away, right? Who got here before we got here? But they stick to their game plan. But as they went into the tomb, and I guess they had to duck their head a little bit, but you get the idea, it's kind of a roomy place, which probably most tombs weren't. You know, this was a cave, so to speak, a little one. They entered the tomb, and Mark says they saw a young man. But Mark didn't say how young. But the question is, why does he say young at all? do you think that that man in there is an angel?
I do.
Yeah, and when you think of angels, they don't look like me, right? Angels are always, of course, we're all gonna be angels someday, right? We're never gonna age, we're just gonna stay young and wrinkle-free, but this one is dressed in a meticulously white robe, because angels always dress in white, probably, right? And I think Mark probably put him in there to remind us of the transfiguration. Okay, the transfiguration was great, but you ain't seen nothing yet. You know, wait till you hear what already happened. Because remember, Jesus was dressed in white on that mountain when James and John and Peter went up there with him. And I also think, well, it's not me, but I've read on several occasions, scholars think that Mark wanted his community to see the angel dressed in white to remind them of martyrdom. When a person in early Jesus followers was going to be martyred, either in the Colosseum or in the Forum or in the courtyard, he would be dressed in white.
Martyred equal killed,
Yeah,
okay.
he would either be thrown to the lions or beheaded or stoned or skinned alive or stabbed. Martyrs in Mark's community were very, very accustomed to in seeing them in white. That's how they were identified. Because God always vindicated what martyrs did when they died. You died for God, so God would vindicate you, bring you to heaven. You were cleansed by your martyrdom. And that's why this angel is wearing white, to remind Mark's community Jesus was a martyr. And this angel is here to remind us that Jesus was a martyr. And if you get arrested and you're martyred, you'll be dressed in white, and everyone will honor you the way Jesus is being honored. Now, when the women enter the tomb, Mark tells us where the young man is. Where is he?
On the right side.
Yes, the young man
side,
is
yeah.
sitting on the right side of the tomb. And of course he is, right? Because the right side is always the sign of authority. Now, if you came to my my last talk at Venice Golf and Country Club when I did it on Adam and Eve and women versus men, when Christ, when God created man and women, he made the right side of the body man and the left side of the body women, and the right side, that's why the right side is more powerful. Most people write with their right hand because it's the strongest hand. And my daughter was a lefty, right? And she went to a Uba Christian preschool in Tennessee, and when the teacher saw her, said, "Oh no, darling, we're going," made her write with her right. You too?
In New York State.
Oh, isn't that funny? And they thought they were doing you a favor.
Well, it was the right way to go.
That's right. It was the right way to do it.
But
And
it
when-
didn't change you.
Pardon me?
You're still left-handed, I would imagine.
I'm semi.
And what?
That
but
my
I-
daughter
I
too.
write with my right hand,
Oh, you do?
and it's not good.
Oh, that's interesting. Shelby writes with her right hand, but she does everything else left-handed. Plays
I do a
softball,
few
plays
things.
golf.
I
Yeah,
throw a ball.
yeah, yeah,
I deal cards left hand.
yeah. What about pool?
No, right.
Right hand. Oh, interesting. Now, when we pray the Apostles' Creed, where do we pray that Jesus is going to sit?
The right hand of
Right.
God.
On the right hand of the
Yes.
Father, where he shall come to judge, right? But let's go back to this tomb. Now, the women were startled when they saw the young man or the angel. And they must have been startled, right? They must
Oh,
have
yes.
been very alarmed. They must think, first of all, oh my God, we're actually talking to an angel, that's amazing. But then the angel talks back. Look at verse 6. The angel said to them, "Do not be alarmed. I know what you're doing here. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there's the place they laid him." And of course, all the women look, and of course, he's not laying there, right? The place is empty. There's no body in the tomb. There was kind of a bench, kind of carved into the rock, and there's no body on that bench. Nobody's there. Now, if you saw that, if you were one of those women, do you think that was evidence enough for the women to believe what the angel just told them? That he's been raised? Do you think that would have been
Maybe
the first
not.
thing?
I have a very,
You would normally think, no, someone took him.
Yes.
Took him.
yes.
Yes.
It doesn't happen every
The
day
tomb
otherwise.
is empty because he's been raised. But let's read on. What does Mark actually say about it? Mark has the angel talk about it. Look at verse 7. Go,
Go and tell them.
tell his disciples and Peter. Oh dear. Now what do you think that means?
Peter's the head honcho.
You're right? The young man tells the women, leave the tomb and deliver the message. The tomb is empty, there's nobody there. But notice, Mark names the disciples first, and then Peter. And Mark never does that in his gospel. He's really still very annoyed, I think, with
What,
Peter.
I'm not sure
Peter
which
denied
point
it.
is why Peter came second.
Remember what Peter did the whole time?
Oh, he hid.
Yeah, he hid, he
And
denied
denied.
even knowing Jesus. He didn't stick up
Oh,
for
okay.
him.
Okay.
But I mean, that's just our interpretation. Mark never tells us that. But in the past, in his gospel, whenever Mark talks about Peter and the disciples, he always uses the phrase, Peter and the disciples. So you wonder why he isn't doing that here. Why now he's saying the disciples and Peter. He's
Mhm.
giving Peter second billing for the 3 denials, right?
Okay.
Or maybe Peter is not with the disciples in the upper room. Maybe they're really in 2 different places. We think
Oh.
that during the crucifixion, none of the disciples were at the crucifixion. On a
No,
lot
this
of
was mother.
Exactly. But you do get the feeling, though, with John's gospel, that John was there, because that's when Peter hands Mary over to John. This is your mother now, you take care of her. But not in Mark's gospel. None of the disciples are there. The women are really the witnesses, and Mark says from afar they're looking. They didn't get too close. It was probably horrible and terrifying.
And the women didn't come in, the guys were more into
Exactly.
pulling and.
Exactly. So let's look at what exactly the angel wants the women to tell those 12 men. Well, actually, it is 12 because Judas has already been replaced. We think Mattathias, but so Mark tells us that the angel tells the women to go tell the men, Jesus is going ahead of you. And where's he going? Galilee. Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you he would see you. So let's think back for a moment Remember when we were back in chapter 14, when Jesus and his 12 went to the Mount of Olives to pray? Jesus first called his disciples. He wasn't very, well, he was upset, of course. He called them a pack of deserters, actually. But then he said to them, I still love you, even though you're deserting me here, falling asleep when I need you. But listen to me, after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. And you can find that in chapter 14. And I think it's very reasonable for us to assume that the women knew that. The women were probably right there in the Garden of Gethsemane with Jesus and the disciples, because they all went everywhere together. It's very possible they were on that mountain, or at the very least they heard about the mountain experience. But what do you think about that idea, that there were more than 12 disciples around Jesus that night in Gethsemane? I think it was more than just the 12. And we do think that there were more than 12 disciples in the big picture. And we do think that a lot of those disciples were women, right? Yes. So, either these women heard it firsthand, right out of Jesus' mouth, go to Galilee, I'll meet you there. Or they heard someone say that Jesus said that, about meeting up in Galilee.
He may have said it more than once.
Oh, I'm sure. And that's what makes the end of Mark's gospel so strange. People are still talking about this because now the women know this and they love Jesus and they've been with him every step of the way. They were braver than any of the disciples. They were present. They witnessed it. And they must have heard that Jesus said, meet me in Galilee after I'm raised. And that's what makes it so strange. Because look at what Mark says the women do. Verse 8. So they went out, they kind of hightailed it out of that cave, and they didn't give the angel a chance to tell them anything else. They just fled out of the tomb. They ran away. But why? Why did they run away?
It says terror and amazement.
Amazement. And fear. Fear. They were so scared. So because they were amazed and they were frightened, what did they do?
They didn't tell anybody.
Nothing. They did nothing. They said nothing to anyone. Yeah. And that's how he closes, because they were afraid. And that's the end. The end of the story.
I can imagine that those three women coming back to the group and
Right?
saying, this is what we just went through, would not be believed.
I know. Okay, I'm starting this OS. And what's next Thursday's date? August.
7?
Close enough.
Today's the 30th.
Or the 30th?
Today's the 29th.
All right, everyone, send us your questions and concerns. Why did they run away silently?
It's the 30th.